topics under the broad headings of representative government, international relations, natural resources, and social policy. And the work of the studies is done at the local, state, and national levels. League, an organization of men and women, is dedicated to the principles of self-government established by our United States Constitution. Its work is to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in government. Since its inception, the League has been an activist grassroots organization whose leaders believe that people like you and me should play a critical role in democracy. Its mission has been to secure our democracy's promise through voter education, issue advocacy, and citizen outreach. Our goal remains to create participatory democracy where citizens are actively involved in their communities, at the ballot box.
All right, I'm on.
In public policy debates, and in government deliberations. The Marblehead League has long-standing interests in voter integrity, education, government, open space, recycling, and environment, to name a few. Our Get Out the Vote efforts and voter registration continue to be a long-term focus, along with citizen education programs. Throughout the pandemic, we continued virtual meetings of our book club, racial justice group, current events group, steering committee, observer course, and many other things. We had a virtual candidates nights and other programs for the public. And importantly, we learned a lot doing all of this and had a lot of fun doing so. Currently, we have close to 60 active members and encourage any of you who might be interested in joining to go to the website and learn more. At the end of the formal program, we'll invite any of you who have questions about the League or membership to stay on for further information. And now I turn the program over to our steering committee member, Shari Pressman, who you probably know from all the many candidates night forums she's run. Shari will introduce Police Chief King, who we are so fortunate to have with us this evening. So over to you, Shari and Police Chief King. You're mute, Shari. There you go.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. We're pleased to welcome Marblehead's Chief of Police, Dennis King, this evening. Chief King became Marblehead's police chief over the 4th of July weekend this year. He previously served as Salem's police chief. He holds bachelor's and master's degrees in criminal justice from Salem State University and a law degree from the Massachusetts School of Law. He's been a law enforcement professional for 26 years with experience in police administration, community engagement, mental health, substance use, use of force, and graffiti investigations. He's been collaborating with community members on tough issues for years and is willing to institute non-traditional police strategies to address them. Chief King was born in Salem and is a resident of Swampscott. Chief King will speak to us for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions. Chief King, welcome, and thank you for agreeing to speak with all of us tonight. You're muted. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you, everyone, for having me and for inviting me to speak to your group. I will say this: I am a little bit preoccupied. Salem is in the midst of investigating a double shooting, and as I was preparing my final notes and words for this, I've been a little bit distracted from that. So absent an emergency call of assistance from me, I will be able to stay the whole time. But I apologize that my mind is a little bit with my former department and their efforts right now on a significant event. So with that, good evening. Thank you all for having me, and I look forward to working with you on projects and efforts that better the town of Marblehead and the Marblehead Police Department in Salem. The police department had a great relationship with the League of Women Voters, often helping each other further worthy causes critical to our democracy, which I truly believe in. At the urging of the League of Women Voters, I created a voter protection statement to encourage citizens to vote by outlining extra steps I was taking in Salem to ensure voting places were free of harassment or discouragement. I also took questions by the League of Women Voters when conducting a use of force forum with Mayor Driscoll, and I found the League's questions to be substantive and thoughtful. I'm certain that my relationship will continue to foster dialogue and input on a variety of policing practices as it did in Salem. Part of the reason I've accepted every invitation to speak, and I have accepted every one from every group, is really to find out where I fit in, and to tell you a little bit how I got here. So I have been a police officer in Salem for about 25 years. I rose to the ranks from a patrolman to a captain. I served in the acting chief capacity for about 9 months. But probably my most kind of area that I think I thrived the most in, there were a couple that I really enjoyed, but I was part of leading the community impact unit in Salem that did a ton of work around community engagement. As you mentioned in my bio, the non-traditional methods to address quality of lives. And it really guided me for most of my decisions going forward. That was a real simple philosophy that we do better as police departments when asking the community to help solve police issues. I understand and embrace civic engagement. It will be a part of every policy and program that we roll out here at the Marblehead Police Department. I appreciate organizations like the League for their willingness to implement best practices with core principles that guide you. And I love the core principles that guide you: working to register voters, providing voters with election information through voter guides, and then, as you mentioned before, fostering the candidate forums and debates. I'm very fortunate to have just completed my law degree. I say that it's been, if I'm looking at the date, almost a year to this day. You seem to remember your last law school exam, and it's just about a year to this date that I had passed it. I can tell you that in addition to my law degree, I valued my time at Salem State tremendously. I have some areas that I think that the League takes positions on quite a bit, and I think we could have some great topics on around defensive tactics, use of force. I've been an instructor in those areas for about 18 years. So I basically taught Salem Police Department's use of force and defensive tactics for almost 2 decades. I was able to, through the different areas that I have been part of, is really to have an understanding of mental illness, addiction, and the like. And I've been in some really fortunate programs and developed policies and things around those areas that I think changed part of the way that we did business in Salem. And I really look forward to bringing those here to Marblehead. I've been married, for about 27 years. I have 3 children. I've lived in Swampscott for 15 years. I'm on the board of director at Plummer Youth Promise. If anybody is familiar with that, half the board is from Marblehead, so I'm sure that everybody here probably knows somebody from Plummer Youth Promise. And I really am immersing myself into this Marblehead community that has answered every call that I've asked them and that I've been part of. And I'm just tremendously impressed with the way that the members of this community conduct themselves. I have a reputation for collaboration. I do get my hands dirty, and oftentimes I'm brutally honest. You can trust me, for which I know I must build your trust, and know I always will make decisions that are best in the best interest of the town and the police department, never myself. And I think that a couple of people that have heard me speak a little bit are saying that these are tenets that you've said before, but it is the truth. I make my decisions that are for the best interests of the town and the best interests of the police department, whether they're difficult or not. So I think that some of the agenda items you were looking for me, I'll go into a little bit of them now. So no, I'll create a department that acts on community policing philosophies to reduce crime and also promote the fair treatment of all, regardless of who you are. And there is a lot of talk around community policing. It's not a new concept. I believe that it really only survives when everybody in the department believes in it and believes that we get better results in terms of reducing crime, but quite frankly, getting people involved in their own protection of themselves and their community together. Social justice issues matter to me a lot. Understanding why cultural differences should not be divisive, but rather an opportunity to improve our entire community as we know it, with the department often serving as the spare to lead that way. I will ensure that everyone is treated fairly, equitably, and with respect. I'm not at all immune to the criticism that police have taken for over the last 18 months or so, nor the criminal justice reform that has been established by the state legislator, which I have a feeling that you guys were active participants in. I believe in these changes around accountability and transparency. I believe in the certification process for police officers and creating opportunities for a diverse and culturally competent department. I believe the only way a department can effectively serve its community is through trust. I'll do everything in my power to strengthen and reestablish that trust in areas that perhaps we have lost it over the last couple of years here in the Marblehead Police Department. And I recognize the League's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also am committed to these principles so as to create a workplace free from discrimination and harassment for all officers. Some of that includes recognizing that policing in the United States has been marred by unfair treatment of marginalized groups based on political and societal power bases. I've done work on racial and ethnic disparities in the juvenile justice system before, and will work on identifying and dealing with disparities as we address them. What else have I seen? What else am I doing? So what I've seen so far, I have a professional, well-trained police department that's hardworking. I believe that Chief Piccarello, so I'm sure that you also have had a relationship with, left me a strong foundation. I watched them work in unison for serious calls and really probably the biggest staffing shortage that the department has seen in decades. And that is impressive. They have been impressive from the way that we handled the emergency, the Northeaster that came in a couple of weeks back, to some other serious medical calls, to even the ability to investigate crimes. I will remind my officers why we took this job: to make a difference with those that need us most, because I believe that. Those amongst us who suffer from substance abuse disorders, which is, we all know, is a debilitating disease, to those that are in a mental health crisis, and those that just need compassion or a kind gesture. That often could be from our elderly population to our homeless, to any of these disenfranchised groups. I'll be openly engaging you on issues around social justice, quality of life, and crime. Marblehead is a community rich in history and tradition, and I appreciate and respect that, and I'm glad that I'm going to be part of that going forward. When the Marblehead Police Department was accredited in 2019, it committed itself to a professional excellence in the best practices for law enforcement. I'm confident that I can maintain the standard of excellence and lead the department forward into new heights. I will work with residents, business leaders to develop, as I said before, non-traditional approaches to problem solving and quality of life issues. And I'll ask that you help me solve these problems together. So that is a little bit of my thought. I'm sure that you have questions for me about specific items that I'll be glad to answer. Again, I thank you for having me. I thank you for your input. And I really do value the substantive work that I've observed the League participate in. And I'm going to say that, and some things that I don't 100% agree with you on, but I believe the substantive work around things that we have agreements on, we can work together. And I think it's fair to say that that's what we need to kind of move the dial going forward. then I apologize for looking at my phone. All right.
Thank you so much, and especially for being here while this crisis is occurring in Salem. So we really appreciate your time here with us. Now is the time for all of you to ask your questions. And could you please use the chat to write in your questions, and we'll take them from there. And while you're writing in your questions, I have a couple of questions we can just get started, which were written by the steering committee.
Sure.
Let me just let Alexa in. Okay. First of all, and this, you alluded to this, but maybe you can give us a little more specific information. What training do Marblehead officers receive for dealing with people experiencing mental health and addiction? Have special protocols been implemented for dealing with them?
So there are trainings that you do traditionally when you first become a police officer. You go to the recruit academy. It's about 6 months, and you learn the basics. What are your power of arrest? You learn about substance use disorders. You learn about how to handle a traffic stop, all of these things. And from that 6 month period on, everything is a learning cycle, and you have to do yearly in-service, which includes standard topics like use of force, defensive tactics, legal updates. And then really there is additional training that then is basically dictated by society. What are we dealing with? And so when I first started, there was no specific training on substance use disorders or mental illness. And so I can tell you that in the last 5 years, there's very specific trainings around how to handle somebody in a crisis, identifying all of the things that you might see from somebody that is suffering from it, that might suffer a mental health or from a mental illness, and learn how to not exacerbate a situation, but perhaps de-escalate it. That's a big part of what the handling a mental health call is talking about. And then I will just slide into de-escalation, which has become a part of not just how we handle those suffering from a crisis or some sort of mental health episode, but how do we handle people in general as police officers to de-escalate so that we are not being put in positions where we have to perhaps use force or they're exacerbated by the use of force. And so de-escalation is a training that goes right in that. And then there is a lot of substance use disorder training that comes out now that really understands like the things of perhaps an opiate addiction, that it's a disorder that really captures your brain and doesn't let go until you're treated, until there's a lot of work around that, right? So those are the type of trainings. I'll say this really quickly. We are going to be, I'm applying for a grant. We are looking to get a mental health clinician in the police department at least 2 days a week, and then have every officer trained in crisis intervention team training, which is a pretty substantive 40-hour training done by civilian people in the mental health field. That is going to, I think, really augment our response to those that are suffering crisis.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I'm excited about it. We did it in Salem.
I hope you're able to get that grant. That's just great. Another question we just got in from the chat. Can you describe one incident you encountered as a police chief that affected you and drives your philosophy as chief?
So that's a hard question. There's a lot, but I'll give you an example that I had. I'll give you an example that I had with a detective from Boston that I was working with, and a detective from the MBTA that had come down, and we had formed this graffiti task force. And we were doing a lot of work around identifying those that were responsible. There was a lot of North Shore base. We went into Engine House to get something to eat. And one of there was a woman in there that over the course of the last probably 5 years, we've had incidents from me having to arrest her, to me have to assist her as a victim of domestic violence, to probably some of her worst times in her life from a massive addiction to alcohol. And when we were talking, maybe I bought her a slice of pizza. Maybe we just had a conversation. And then I sat down, and the two other officers, they just looked at me and they said, I can't, I can't believe how that interaction went with somebody that, perhaps we would have never treated that way. And so I'm giving you that because you have to really let the person that you're dealing with define themselves in the moment, because sometimes it isn't good. And always have that mindset that even in your worst, there's an opportunity for you to, show me something better later. And I'll tell you that this woman ended up doing phenomenal things, barely struggled with alcohol, but had bouts of sobriety, worked a lot. And when I didn't see her over the next 5 years very much, she would always come up to me when I did see her, give me a hug, and, and kind of just identify that she had been able to overcome that, the really difficult times in her life. And I think that's the type of stuff that kind of grounds how I look at people.
That's a wonderful story. And I bet the way you reacted to her when you sat down and talked to her made a big difference in her healing process that she went through.
Perhaps.
Yeah. A follow-up, a question that the league had, and that was, you referred to the swastika incident. In the report commissioned by our former police chief regarding the swastika incident, the report advised that incidents be reported immediately up the chain of command or directly to you, the chief. How specifically is this being made clear to each person working in the department?
So there's a bunch of things that came from the report that were really positive recommendations on how we move forward. So that specific question that you're having about reporting incidents that come across your purview as a supervisor and an officer, that is part of our policy and our rules and regulations. Where I'm doing where I'm putting a lot of effort in is making sure that that's reinforced and understood. And oftentimes, and so I guess that is something that has to be supported throughout the top of the organization all the way down, that you feel confident that when you report something, there's no backlash from it, and that you can report it, but also identifying the need to address things as they become presented and reported to you. And I'm somebody that is a rip the Band-Aid off type guy, and I'd rather address something and deal with it. And I'm going to tell you that's something that culturally will be reinforced by me. And I think that is, if you read that report, you have to, I don't want to spend the entire time on the report, but if you read the report, you can identify that the victim in that incident, the officer, had a lot to do with where people had a difficult time on how far they should go to it because of his approach to what he thought was the appropriate response. Now, whether I agree with that approach is something that I can deal with going forward. But it was not as if there wasn't really delicate considerations being made. And I don't know if I can speak more to that, but I think that's part of it. So policy existed. I need to now ensure that policy is reinforced, understood by the officers, signed off, followed up by supervisors, and then make sure that when things are reported, that we address them.
Thank you. Another question from our viewers. Since the 4th of July, when you arrived here, has anything surprised you about the town from any viewpoint?
This place shows up like crazy. This town, the civic engagement from the residents of the town of Marblehead has overwhelmed me. And I'm telling that is the one thing that there's a bunch of things that I've been involved in since I started 4 months ago, but that is one of the things that no matter what topic it is, what event, there is plenty of community support. And I've been floored by it, quite frankly, on how engaged civically this town is and what happens to it.
Thank you.
Is that true? I mean, I have a group of headers here, I think, and does everyone share that feeling with me? I mean, you guys, you put your money where your mouth is. It's not just talking. It's like everybody's part of the League of Women Voters. Like every organization wants to get something done.
Yeah. Raise your hand if you think it's true. Yeah. Oh, here's a question. Why isn't the police log published in the Reporter any longer? Do you know?
I do. So it's still published. So we still put out the police log that's required by law. And there are a couple different parts of that. So the dispatch log, what information a dispatcher gets in and puts in a dispatch log, and then what is a report that's made. What is required are these daily log, these blotters, which identifies what an incident is. We were really on the edge of providing personal and sensitive information in some cases. And it was something that when I noticed that, and my detective, and I only have one detective that works, only one patrolman works outside of patrol. That's how short we are. And I was taking almost an hour per day to redact these logs. So I went to what I know to do, which is to go to the system administrators for our record management system and ask if there's a log that information that is personal in nature could be taken out. And that subsequently has changed a little bit of what gets printed. But there is always the ability, if somebody had a specific request on an incident, if there's a police report, to get information that's further. But know that there are much restrictions on what you can get in a police report. For example, domestics there's nothing privy to anybody as it relates to a domestic incident. The state many years ago said that's not part of what we want people to know about each other. And so, you know, I needed to save Detective Gabe's 1 hour a day that she was redacting because I needed her to do a lot of other things. But I did send something to Jack tonight because we do not control the Streamline app either. For some reason, there's a perception that we control the streaming app of our radio frequency. We do not, and so that's a private company. There's a volunteer, but there is an app out there that I believe the Marblehead Reporter put out that has the free app. What we do is we broadcast on radio waves. So if you had an old school scanner, you could pick us up. But I figured I'd knock both of those in one throw. That I did not take us off any app. We just that's not our job to do that. So, but it's out there. There is a free app out there. If you go on you know what? I might even have it. If you go on the Marblehead site, the Marblehead Reporter site, I know that they did a story and that app works.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question, different subject.
Yeah.
What heavy artillery and the like do you receive from the federal government?
So, to my knowledge, none. And you know, I say that because I worked in Salem for 26 years and we didn't get heavy artillery from the federal government. And for what I know about this armory, we do not either. But what I can tell you is that we're part of NEMLEC, which is a regional response. And I guess it's an opportunity to say that whatever comes in to the town for response, that perhaps we are talking about, you know, artillery from the federal government, it's guided both by law and it's guided by myself and the town as we determine perhaps how we were going to quell a disturbance or address a protest. We had 15 protests while I was the chief in Salem. And those weren't even conversations that we had. Even when we had our NEMLEC resources, we dictate what the response is by our regional troops.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks to Jack Attridge who put in the URL to get the stories from the Marblehead Reporter. And you can find it in the chat. Thank you for that, Jack. And Jack's question, how understaffed are we? And if you could tell us about the leaders under your command and our police force while integrating it, the Marblehead Police at MPD.
Okay, thanks, Jack. And so our full complement is 32. I have on the books, including my 2 recruits that are going to the academy in January, would be at 31. I have somebody on admin leave. I have somebody on military leave. And so with the 2 recruits, that means 4 inoperable people that can't work shifts. And when you have, only 21 officers that are filling those shifts, that's roughly 20%, right? So we're talking about, we're understaffed in terms of covering our patrol shifts because we have to account for vacations, for sickness and different things like that. We're not immune to, sicknesses, COVID and the like. And so when you're trying to cover benefit days and you're already down 3 or 4 guys, you're now forcing guys and it becomes problematic. So I just put out for my budget today and asked to have the full 32. We ran at 31 last year. And so hopefully we'll be able to get that back up. And then in terms of integrating with my command staff, so we have 4 sergeants, 4 lieutenants, a captain, and myself. That would be the supervisors. I have found them to be extremely adaptive and talented to do multiple tasks, which I think was really a benefit for me when I started to sit down and see the different things they did from, not only an OIC, but a licensing officer or an evidence officer or an accreditation officer or running the Citizen Police Academy. The supervisors in this police department do an outstanding job and they're multi-talented, and I'm very happy that I'm working with them. I think that, recently I've talked about a couple different changes, that I think that we could bring some additional efficiency to the department, and they've been nothing but receptive. So I think that, it's something that is, I'm very impressed with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Are you content with the civil service test and hiring process? What would you like to see done differently?
So I am a supporter of civil service. I do believe that the origins around taking out, favoritism and the like from the process, I believe in it. I truly do. I believe that there is due process that are afforded to police officers and different people in the different professions, and civil service represents that process. So I do believe in it. I believe that, even though the numbers in general are an all-time low for officers for people taking the police exam, I still was able to capture 15 people from the town of Marblehead that wanted to. We're in a little bit different position than bigger cities because we don't hire very much, right? So we talk about perhaps 1 or 2 a year. And so I believe that I'll always have viable candidates, strong candidates from the town of Marblehead that perhaps grew up here, that are committed to this town in different ways. And that's a tough thing to do right now because police officers are moving quite a bit. They're when I first got on, you never laterally transferred. People are doing it based on benefits and different reasons now. I feel that I will always have the candidates here that are strong. I also say that I've talked about this before. Civil service and the chiefs have asked for civil service to give us a little bit more of an opportunity. And I'm talking in general throughout the Commonwealth to perhaps create a more diverse police department. And I support that. That's a civil service kind of legislative decision, but we can see, how that goes. But I believe the 2 recruits that I've hired represent the values that I believe in. And I also believe that they're truly committed to Marblehead. So, you guys are getting me on a long-winded, kind of I don't want to be long-winded, but I've supported civil service very much throughout my career, and I believe that it works. And it's sometimes, and like anything else, it does need to be adjusted here and there.
Thank you. Thank you again. How much professional development do you think will be possible this fiscal year?
Yeah.
Is this
So-
difficult considering how short-staffed you are at the moment?
So it does make it difficult, and it forces you to be creative as a police administrator. And so that means that there are leadership classes that are offered, there are programs that are offered. I'm still in the kind of feeling out stage of seeing where people are in their careers and their desire for it. But I believe that as I talk to them, they're encouraged by, if they came to me with something in addition to my own identifying it, I would support them. I think that, there is some training cost to different things, and there's some recommendations that the chief has to make based on an individual's desire to go through them. But I believe that I'll be able to get that going on a set manner. But I would also say that, there's professional development that needs to be done from within. And I believe that, I've been trying to embark on that identification of those areas and the like. Good example, I was just fortunate enough to send 2 superior officers to an internal affairs school. And it talks right to the line of how you report and the ability to address something and then do a thorough investigation. And we now have 2 senior supervisors that have that. That's a professional development type of training. And, I was able to work with the town administrator and get them through that.
Oh, great. That's wonderful news. Yeah. What have you learned from your long experience dealing with graffiti that helps you deal with those who spread symbols of hate and the community response?
So great question. And during the time that I was a pretty active graffiti investigator, I probably took out hundreds of charges against individuals for graffiti crimes. Every once in a while, it's a crime was a hateful incident or what we might have determined to be hate-based. And there are 2 lanes that you have to really follow. There's a graffiti investigation lane on how you do that, identifying, perhaps doing some matching of, do you think it's the same person responsible? I have some expertise in that. And then what are the common traits of somebody that's a tagger or a vandal? I know what those are. So I can perhaps assist with that with the detectives that are working them now. And then it really is a whole nother area. We had one yesterday we had one over the weekend at the transfer station. And so it's a whole nother area that takes away from the investigation, that really talks about an absolute this is unacceptable for the community and how we deal with it as a community. And there's transparency to that, but how we say it's not acceptable, and I'll use the resources to hold them accountable. And that part of that other lane can be as tricky as the investigation lane, because you want to make sure that people trust that you're working hard at putting these together. And, we could use the FBI. I mean, there are agencies that we use in Salem. We were able to, it was a couple months after I left, but crack a case on the Patriot Front group, a white supremacist group that had done about 11 or 12 incidents in Salem. I knew what it was going to take to kind of get going on that. And one of the officers caught somebody, doing it in the act, and was able to kind of parlay that into a case. But we had been working with our FBI friends in Salem on that particular group to get a gauge of their propensity for violence and stuff like that. So there's a couple different lanes. I hope that I gave you something of a lucid response to that.
Yeah, you did. Oh, good. We just had another question. Do you foresee a change in the type of person who will want to become a police officer in the future, given all the changes in policing these days?
So that's a tough one. So I believe that the requirements for being a police officer in 2021 is different than it was when I started. The requirements are different. The ability to deal with substance use disorder, to deal with mental health, to deal with and understand the legal ramifications around, disparate treatment of disenfranchised people of color. Though those are very hard concepts that didn't exist, I believe, really openly 25 years ago. And so it's a harder job. So I think that we have been moving towards that type of police officer for as long as I've been on, educated, open-minded, willing to understand and look deeper. We've been moving that way for quite a bit now. So the person that takes that police exam now has to know that it's a hugely difficult, has a lot of responsibilities, and it perhaps does have a little bit of a different outlook, I think, if I was to look back 20 or 25 years ago. But really, really hard job, doable. At the end of all of this, you have to have, to some degree, a calling to want to really help people over yourself. And because it's a hard job, and because you see people at their worst, you really have to have that desire to make a difference. And I hope that that's the people that we still are attracting as if we did years and years ago.
Mm-hmm. Thank you
You're
for that. Are your officers vaccinated against COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, so yes, I mean, I can tell you that there are obviously some legal stuff around that of what I can completely divulge. I think that, but if the question is the percentage of officers in Marblehead Police Department, to my knowledge, from what I can tell them, from what I've understood over the last 4 months, it's extremely high. It was in the 80+%, and was growing when I was in Salem. I feel as if that's there. I'm not putting those numbers that I have definitively, but yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no official mandate for that, is there, at this point?
There is not, right? So we're going by the guidance of the town, which I think is by the guidance of the governor, CDC, trends, all of those, right? Needs. I mean, if you put all that together, then you start to formulate decisions on whether you have these vaccine mandates and the like. And that's a multi-person decision. That I'm just a little piece of that.
Well, congratulations on your law degree. And we have a question about how will your law degree help with your job in Marblehead? So
there's a belief that I have that a good portion of my day revolves around interpreting perhaps a contract issue, dealing with a issue that comes in that might be on discipline or a complaint. These are very specific ways that you break down legal issues. And so I find that the approach to problems that I've been presented, my 9 months in Salem and now my 4 months here, that it's afforded me a very specific lens to look at issues. And I think that, I think it's a positive attribute to have. I'd say that public record requests, for example, are something that there is a town council that assists with those, but they require almost a degree in themselves to be able to answer a public record request that has some areas that are border on exempt and the like. And so I find myself writing those quite a bit. And I wouldn't, I don't know, when I started, I think I was 46. And so I had 2 kids in college. My little one was I think just about in high school. And, I didn't realize that it would take 4 years of my life away from me. And it took every second and every minute outside of work to study and get through law school. I believe I'm in this position partly because of my experience and the degree and helped. But it was a great sacrifice. If any of you are looking to go get your law degrees, think it's like drinking water from a fire hose.
That's a real achievement with children at home and working full time to get your degree. Congratulations again.
Thanks.
Do you have women among your staff?
I want more. One of my, I do. And so I have, Teresa Gay is a fantastic officer and detective. She has a law degree. She was a DA. And so, I mean, talking about hitting the jackpot, I have somebody that has a legal mind that is outstanding, but also does tremendous work with people. And so, I would replicate her 100 times over. But I would also say that I've identified that as something for me that I can perhaps recruit. I do have this is public record, so the top of our list right now in Marblehead Civil Service is a female. And I also will say this: my mentors, more mentors in my police career were females than males. And so from Mary Butler to Kathy Makros, I had such an influence from female officers, because in Salem it was very much commonplace that I did with my male mentors. And so that, if you're wondering how I feel about that, that's
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Another question just came in. Can you respond to the report that a woman of color applied to become a police officer in Marblehead and got tired of waiting and went to the Lynn Police Department instead?
I don't know. That question is the first time I've been posed with it. I can tell you that could very well happen. First, you'd have to be on the list. You'd have to have more than likely residency and or perhaps some sort of veteran status. So I called, I want to say, for 17. I ended up getting 17 names to fill 2 positions. And, I think I ended up with 3. And so the way I took the top 2. So at the end of it, I can't speak directly to that, but I know that Lynn had a shortage, and they were, for one of their first times in their history, the last exam, pulling from their outside of town list, which almost never happens. And if they picked up this young lady, I'm glad for her. I know that they picked up a friend of mine from Salem Sun, and I know that they picked another young lady from Marblehead. She's not a person of color that I have, that I knew for years, that was on my list, that is now over in Lynn. And, I think that is part of it, but I wish I could speak specifically to that, but I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions in the chat. If you have, we're almost at the end of our time, but if you could take a couple more questions, I'll ask if anyone wants to raise their hand. Bill, would you like to unmute yourself and ask a question? You're muted, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. Chief, I have 2 dogs and I walk them on the sidewalks, which may be a question, but my question is about the bicyclists on the sidewalks, especially Atlantic Avenue. And if I were a biker, I would not ride on Atlantic Avenue either. It's very, very tight going up and down there. So, but anyway, I was walking the dog and I was coming down Barnard and I was approaching Atlantic Avenue, and these 2 bicyclists just shot out of nowhere and almost hit my dogs and so forth. So I appreciate the narrowness of the roads and everything else. And I read someplace that the department was going to do something about the bikes on sidewalks. So that's my question.
So I don't know if if I put anything specifically on bikes on sidewalks. We did receive a grant that is based on enforcement of a variety of infractions around drunk driving, distracted driving, and also does include pedestrian education and the like. And so I think we might be able to pull some of the, as long as it fits within the grant's parameters, pull some of the bike acknowledgement. So, absent a reason for a bike to be on the sidewalk, no viable street. I mean, there's specific rules around that type of stuff. Generally speaking, almost all, if not the far majority of the time, people shouldn't be riding bikes on sidewalks. And, you know, there is something to be said about a call for action on that. If it's identified as a problem in general, I'm for making sure that my officers are aware of it. And if they can educate a group, I mean, so I see kids on bikes, and, you know, I'm not saying that I've observed them to all be angels in terms of how they ride it, but if it's an opportunity for an officer to engage and explain why, Bill, your type of incident, you know, is inappropriate, I think that you know, that's something we can do. And I'm still learning the bike, you know, kind of activity in Marblehead. I've met with you know, the group that supports the bike safety and the like, and we had a great conversation about, you know, what to do to improve it. So I think that it's part of a bigger, you know, picture for me. I wish I had a more clear answer, but you've now put it on my radar. I feel as if you have reached out to, at least that has been on my radar, and you know, I can make sure that we're looking out for it.
Well, you've only been there 4 months, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. One more question. Does anyone, or should we just say thank you to our chief and let him get back to his police work has to do tonight? Right, well, we really appreciate everything your time you've spent with us, and I feel we're very lucky to have you as our chief in Marblehead, and look forward to getting to know you and learning more about you. But thank you so much for being here, and good luck tonight with your work in Salem.
No, I appreciate it, and thank you. And this is just the start of the dialogue. I know that there are substantive areas that that the league has positions on, and I'd gladly, you know, at some other point or through, you know, one-on-one or two-on-one meetings, you know, entertain anything that you have, because I believe that the discussion only makes us better. So, you know, I know that, you know, that's the next phase. I think you guys were very, you know, I think this was great in terms of getting to know me in a little of the areas, but I'm also ready to move into that substantive area of moving on things that you guys have interest in.
Thank you so much. We'll take you up on that.
All right. Well, thank you. And I'll see you all later. All right.
Okay. And I invite those of you who would like to stay on, if you have any questions about membership of the league, to please do so.